Mr. President, you've been in politics a very long time, so let's speak frankly. We're all adults here. Has this shooting changed the trajectory of this race?
I don't know, and you don't know either.
As the full-blown MAGA convention got underway in Milwaukee last night, President Biden sat down for a testy and controversial one-on-one interview with Lester Holt. Now, the interview has become the subject of some passionate discussions today, including a harsh criticism by one of Holt's NBC colleagues that we're going to cover later on. But first, let's get into the details of this sensational interview and the regrets Lester Holt might well have had this morning. While many eyes and bandaged ears were focused on Milwaukee last night, Biden was busy taking Lester to school about the double standards journalists are applying to the candidates.
There's a whole range of things that, look, I'm not the guy that said, I want to be a dictator on day one. I'm not the guy that refused to accept the outcome of the election. I'm not the guy who said that wouldn't accept the outcome of this election automatically. You can't only love your country when you win.
This interview was important because it was another chance for Biden to underscore his strength and his focus. And as Lester Holt repeatedly tried to lead the interview toward questions of Biden's ability and judgment, Biden instead questioned the press's inability to call out Donald Trump on his endless and egregious lies. The exchanges get intense early on when Holt suggests Biden needs to get back on track in the public's eye. It's a preview of the tone and tenor of the controversial exchange we'll run in just a second.
Do you just not say anything because it may incite somebody? Look, I have not engaged in that rhetoric. Now, my opponent is engaged in that rhetoric. He talks about there'll be a bloodbath if he loses.
But in this first clip, watch how Biden scolds Holt when he presses him on whether he would agree to an extra debate against Trump to prove his mental prowess, in addition to the second and final debate scheduled on September 10th. Well, here's what went down between Biden and Holt.
But if the opportunity came up to do one between now and then, is there a sense of wanting to get back on the horse?
I'm on the horse. Where have you been? I've done 22 major events, met thousands of people, overwhelming crowds, a lot happening.
The disparity exhibited by the mainstream media is stunning as it applies to the passes given to Trump and his bullhorn of lies, while Joe Biden is analyzed, dissected, and scrutinized without surcease. It's just a matter of journalistic responsibility that the same standards be applied to both. And that was the president's axe to grind with Lester Holt and the brain trust at 30 Rock. While the clip we'll show you speaks for itself, earlier today, Joe Scarborough had plenty to say about his colleague Lester Holt, and we'll cover that in a minute. But first, let's watch as Lester presses the president in a condescending tone, questioning in fact whether Biden saw what the rest of us saw on that debate night. And that's when President Biden pushes back on the bad press coverage and holds Mr. Holt accountable. Let's go, Joe.
I guess the question is, are you all on the same page? Are you seeing what they saw, which was moments of, frankly, that you appeared to be confused?
Lester, look, why don't you guys ever talk about the 28 lies he told? Where are you on this? Why didn't the press ever talk about that? 28 times it's confirmed he lied in that debate. I had a bad night. I wasn't feeling well at all. And I had been, I screwed up. But
I just asked the question because the idea that you may or may not have seen what some of these other folks have seen, you're not on the same...
I'd have to see I was there. I'd have to see it, I was there. And by the way, seriously, you won't answer the question, but why didn't the press talk about all the lies he told?
Well,
I didn't know anything about that.
We have reported many of the issues that came up during that debate.
No, you haven't.
We'll provide you with them.
God love you.
Okay.
The interview may have been overshadowed by the MAGA gala in the city Trump once called horrible and overrun by crime. Hey, just being fair and balanced. But President Biden not only stood up to Lester Holt's questionable questions, he elevated the discussion to include the press's role in shaping public perception. Why, even Joe Scarborough, Holt's NBC colleague, took Lester to task over the interview, specifically citing Holt's obsession to tag Biden with the inflammatory rhetoric label. Scarborough said he needed to address Holt's obsession with getting Biden to admit he's engaged in violent rhetoric and needs to tone down his criticism of the former president. Well, we just need to talk about that line of questioning from NBC's Lester Holt. To ask about what the president said in a private fundraiser to donors, well, I think any of us would have asked that question. But to ask that question without any context about the politically violent rhetoric that Republicans have been engaged in for close to a decade now, we could talk about Nancy Pelosi, we could talk about the assassination of the Joint Chiefs, the hangings of Mike Pence. We could go on and on and on, but to ask that question absent of any context seems to me, well, you talk about phony moral relativism. I was screaming throughout that part of the interview, and I must say I was shocked. That's what Joe Scarborough said this morning on MSNBC, and I'm with you, Joe, because with everything that's on the line in this election, it's enough to make anyone scream.